Let me.
No, it's okay, babe.
We may need to. You can have one. Yeah, that's okay. You can, and then I did a couple extra, so.
I need one. What? The other one.
Okay. There we go. You're welcome. Should we move this table in a little bit?
Sure.
I feel like you're far away.
If it's not so full, you can sit down.
Oh, we can move it over. There we go. It's very heavy.
I know.
There we go. Good. There. Come a little bit closer. Here's a handout.
Oh, okay.
And if you would like a clipboard just to make it easier to write, and if you want a pen, here's a pen.
Thank you.
So, shall we start? Awesome. Welcome, everyone. We're so happy to have you here. My name is Patty Milligan. I've met some of you before, and I know some of you have been here before. Has everyone been here before? Okay. So I'm going to talk a lot, and we're going to hopefully have lots of time for questions, but how we'll end is with a tour. So when I made this handout, I was thinking, oh, it's so ugly. Because, you know, when you're making a PowerPoint, you want lots of pictures, and I thought I'm making a really ugly handout. But we have a garden. So the garden is the other half of our handout. So when Priscilla brought the youth to the farm in July, I had a conversation with parents. Oh, how do you grow this? I love to grow things. I want to grow good food for my family, but I don't know how to grow in Alberta. And so that's where we kind of thought, look, let's do some workshops or do some Hi, come on, right here, yeah. Let's do some classes or do some workshops which are for people who have no gardening experience in Alberta. So I noticed while I was putting this together, I kept saying beginner gardener, but I know people may have lots of experience, just not here. So welcome.
Thank you.
Come on in. Hi, I'm Patty.
Clements.
Clements, nice to meet you.
Thank you.
So maybe before we start, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself. Well, first I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I first started working at the urban farm as a beekeeper. So I was beekeeping and doing the school tours and teaching kids about bees. And I did that for about 3 or 4 years, and then my role shifted. So what I'm called is the agriculture education specialist, which is a very fancy way of saying that my goal is to teach people about food and farming. And I really love it. I grew up on a farm just outside of Edmonton, and I'm not an expert at gardening. I have grown up with my grandma and my mom gardening my whole life. I garden quite a bit. I get to interact with gardeners here, but I'm not one of those people who knows everything or even knows every plant. But I love explaining things and sharing what little I do know. So hopefully you'll find it useful, and you'll probably ask questions I won't know the answer to, but we will find them out. I have a feeling that because of how things are going with for instance, we've talked with Priscilla a little bit about having a plot here next year. So I feel like we're at the start of something that is going to grow, and I'm very excited about that. And that may include figuring out how to grow things that we do not find here very often. So that's also super exciting. So I would love to hear from each of you who you are. If you want to tell me who you are, what your gardening experience is, and maybe what you hope to achieve here in Edmonton in terms of gardening. Elma, do you want to start? No, someone else? Priscilla, would you like to start?
Okay, I'll speak on our behalf.
Okay, sure.
So, I just have a little vegetable garden in my backyard.
Yeah.
And last year I was able to grow like a whole lot of kale.
Kale? Yeah.
Yeah, and the kale really helped me all through from May till March this year.
Wow.
Yeah, so I grew a lot that I ate within the period, and I was able to preserve till March.
Preserved it.
Yeah.
Cool.
So last year was a bit of experimenting for me. I harvested one squash,
Okay.
and that's how I found out that like some things are more profitable to plant than others.
Sure.
I also did cucumbers. I harvested just two.
Okay.
Yeah. I did pepper. I didn't harvest any.
Yeah.
I did tomatoes. They were still green by winter, so I didn't harvest any.
Okay.
So bulk of what I harvested last year was just corn and kale, but more of kale.
Okay.
So this year, just with that knowledge, I tried to do more of things that before,
Yeah.
and that was like strawberries, because they are also perennials. I just have to leave them like in the ground, right? To like,
Yeah.
I don't have to do anything about them.
Yeah.
So I created a different area just so like the perennials can be there.
Okay.
And then I did kale again.
Yeah.
I tried spinach also this year.
Yeah.
But then this year was also a learning experience for me with spinach, because I realized that when the weather gets so hot, they go into seeding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they also grow pretty fast.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to like learn from that experience this year and next year.
Sure.
So I feel like with vegetables it's pretty much easy, like to have like very quick harvest.
Sure.
Yeah. And kale just grows all through.
Yeah.
The thing with kale I figured last year was white butterflies.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, they attack the couple. So this year I put like a net over it.
Sure. Yeah.
Just so like the white butterflies don't get into it. So I also did a couple of cucumbers again this year. I haven't gotten any harvest, but I had the seeds, so I just did that. Then I grew chives and spring onions also.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've had a couple of harvests with chives also.
Okay.
I've had a couple of harvests with maize. I've had just one harvest with maize.
Okay.
And we had like 6 corns from
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then bulk of what I've had,
Tricky. Yeah.
bulk of what I've had an harvest of has really been spinach and kale.
Spinach
Also,
and kale have been your big
yeah, and then
harvests.
strawberries also. The strawberries have started coming out.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah. So this year, strawberries, corn, kale, spinach,
Okay.
and chives have been what? Yeah. So
And that's your second year of growing.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
That's great. Cool. Good. Did you want to add anything?
No, we're together.
Yeah.
The same farm.
In case you think your daughter missed anything. Clement?
Resume.
Yeah.
Alright, my name is Clement, like I said. My wife was one that registered.
Okay.
She ought to be here, but for some reason, she wasn't able to make it, so I'm here.
Okay.
Well, she did agree to economics, and I'm sure she would have had a lot to tell.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was
Yeah.
her field, that was her forte. My
Right,
background is very different from this.
Sure.
But, suddenly I became interested in, agriculture, because yesterday she bought some pepper.
Yeah.
And when she told me the amount this pepper cost, and I was like, well, how come we can't grow this thing? Why we just came to Canada,
Okay.
US.
Yeah.
Even in the US, we came to US 2017, but eventually we were here.
Yeah.
We have a basement in our place, and then sometime in the past, she bought some plant materials and lights.
The lights. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah.
She never continued.
Right.
So when she bought the papers yesterday, and I asked her the amount she bought them, and it was shocking to me. I was like, come, remember you have this stuff downstairs? We went downstairs to the basement to check those stuff, and
Yeah.
I was like, I'm ready to partner with you now. Let's get this thing going. We
Sure.
should do something
Yeah.
from this and also make some money. Or even if we don't make money,
Yeah,
at least we won't spend the money
for sure.
we,
Yeah.
we use it.
You've already spent that
Sure,
money.
yeah.
Let's not spend a ton of money on expensive peppers.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
she told me there are videos, resources
Oh yeah,
abound on YouTube
For sure.
that one can go to
Yeah.
learn how to do this stuff.
for sure.
But
Yeah.
then in my secondary school days, I did some plantation.
Okay. Yeah.
So I have some really gardening experience,
Yeah.
but not as extensive.
Okay. Okay. So a basement-based pepper growing operation is what's on your mind.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Cool. That's awesome. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have room care,
Ronke. Okay.
but
Oh.
yeah.
No, please correct me. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have experience planting growing up with my dad,
Okay.
but that's back in Nigeria, Africa, and it was pretty easy. We just had a small plot, and we just threw in the seeds, just cover it up. You know, we
They
barely
grow.
even water, they just grew.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and I loved that so much.
Yeah.
But coming here, and then I thought, oh, I might do this for my children as well,
Sure.
right? And then it's not been successful
Oh,
so far.
sure.
And I think it's because I think I'm lazy about the taking care of plants.
Okay.
Yeah, so my hope is to, learn how to plant indoors. I mean, hearing him talk about the basement idea, I'm like, oh my goodness, looks like someone has solution to my problem.
Okay.
I got a number of plant gifts over summer,
Sure.
and I just didn't take care of them.
Yeah.
So I had no harvest. I mean, I came here for the
Yeah.
for the stuff with my daughter, and
Yeah.
then we got was it lettuce, I think? That
Yeah.
planted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh, you planted the lettuce in
yeah,
the little
we did
pot.
it, and then we took
Did
it
it grow? Yeah.
It started growing.
Good.
But,
Yeah. Yeah.
but then I don't know what happened.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Often
yeah.
the start for many of us for many kinds of projects is we have lots of energy and then the energy goes down. Yeah.
And knowing myself, I'm like, I was telling my husband last week, I can't keep up with this thing.
Sure.
I need to be able to grow indoors.
Okay.
So if I can get some tips for that,
Okay.
that would be like
Okay. Okay.
the best help for me. Because I really want to grow my food
Yeah.
as much as possible.
Yeah. We'll have a little bit of tips today.
Sorry, I have something to chip in.
Yeah.
So I harvested lettuce also. I forgot to mention that. We've been harvesting lettuce every 2-3 days. Like
Were you growing indoors?
no, I started indoors. Then
Yeah.
I moved it out.
I think that's why I went wrong. Because it was initially sprouting and decided. So
Yeah.
we should have moved outdoors. I
It
guess
could
we
have.
missed
Yeah.
that part.
With the
Yeah.
lettuce, there are some.
And then they started falling off.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
They grow like every 2-3 days, like really
These
fast.
will make you feel okay about growing outdoors, but with some kind of clear steps that you can take. Also, my goal is for everyone to do things the easiest way possible. So I think sometimes the information you get about gardening is super complicated, and I'm a person who, if it's not easy, I start it and then it gets lost. So I really we'll even talk about what the easiest plants are to grow that you could just grow and you barely need to care for. So that's also, I mean, there's no 100% work-free gardening. All of it requires work, but as least work as possible is my goal. Because otherwise so sometimes I hear people speak about gardening and they make it super complicated. And I just think, oh, I want to run away. So, Alman.
Yeah, okay. My name is Alman. I am from Ethiopia. So, in our country, we just buy something like small items like salt and oil. The rest is we have in our farm.
Okay.
So, I grew up in a farm area, but since I came here, because I didn't get any
being in an apartment definitely limits what you can do. There are some things you can do if you have a balcony or a patio. And even if you just have a bright window, there are some things you can do, but you are limited. Yeah. Janet, did you want to add anything about your gardening experience or what you would like to do? Learning about gardening? No? Okay. But we've heard kale twice here, right? Sorry about that. And it is, kale is definitely on my list of one of the plants that you get a really good bang for your buck. It grows really well. You can harvest it throughout the year. It doesn't mind colder temperatures, so you can plant it a bit earlier and you can harvest it a bit later. So it's a really great plant to start with, especially for a beginner gardener. Thank you all for sharing that information. Let's plunge in, and this is more of a conversation, and there's lots of info here. I'll kind of follow along and talk as we go. And you should just interrupt with questions or comments, and all if you want. So if you leave here and there's something you still don't know, let us know, because we figure out a way either to have another class or to write about it. We can't, of course, cover everything in detail in just 1 hour, but one of the things that is very confusing for people when they move here from other parts of the world, other parts of Canada, from the US, from West Africa, from East Africa, is how do you grow anything here when you have such cold winters, right? So one of the things to know about is plant hardiness zones. So they are a way of saying, here's where we live. They attach a number to it, and then when you go off to the greenhouse to buy that beautiful tree or that particular perennial, you want to look at the tag and say, does this fit my zone? So in Canada, we have zones from 0, which would be Nunavut, all the way to 9, which there's very tiny areas of 9. I believe they're in like Osoyoos in southern BC. But say Victoria on Vancouver Island would be an 8. That's our warmest. And then of course, we have the Okanagan is quite hot, and then also the Niagara Peninsula in Ontario would be another place that's one of our warmer zones. But otherwise, much of Canada is in that, 4-3-2 area. So in Edmonton, we are in zone 3B. Every zone is divided into 2, 3A, 3B. And 3B, the A is slightly warmer and the B is slightly colder. So in general, in Edmonton, we're in zone 3B. But even if you go out of the city, say to where I grew up, which is, a half-hour drive away, you have zone 2, right? So the zone is really important. And what I find is often, I don't want to paint all retailers in a bad light, but often retailers, as long as you're spending money at their place, they don't care. So they might sell you a tree and they might not clearly indicate what that zone is, and that tree dies. The next year you're buying a new one, the next year you're buying a new one, the next year you're buying a new one. So as soon as you know about the zones and you kind of look for it and ask questions about them, then you're one step ahead. You can actually even I have the website there. It's the planthardiness.gc.ca. They have a search function where you can search in it and say, what are the plants that are hardy to my zone? Okay, but good greenhouses with educated workers will be able to answer your questions, and if they're good, they will do it honestly. So that makes me sort of encourage you to go to actual greenhouses. There's quite a few in the city. I've given you a list, and even get to know them, because you just build that kind of trust, and then you get a sense of whether they know their stuff. So you want to pay attention to zones. So because we're in zone 3, anything from 0 to 3 will grow here.
Okay.
The zone is based on minimum temperatures, so how cold it gets in the winter. So zone 3 is minus 37 to minus 34 degrees Celsius, right? And we know we get temperatures, we can get temperatures colder than that, but not that often. But they also base it on the amount of rain we have, the amount of wind we have, the amount of sun we have. So they take these 7 factors and come up with what is good for the zone. So as soon as you know zone 3, that really helps. Plants should have tags on them. And I looked around, I wish I had been planning for this class spring, because then I would save some tags or go get some tags. But if you have a chance, I know there's not really any plants left in the stores, but even just in the spring, practice reading tags. Look at them and see what they say. And this is especially important when we're talking about perennials. Perennials are plants that survive the winter, and they get big and beautiful, and they will have flowers, they'll produce fruit, they'll produce seeds, and then it will look like they die in the fall, but really it's almost like they just go dormant. The roots are still alive, they're underground, they're protected, you leave them, and then in the spring they come back. So those are perennials. So when you start practicing reading plant tags, you'll also look to see if it's a perennial or an annual. So an annual plant is one that the whole life cycle happens in one summer. You plant the seed, it grows, the vegetable or the fruit grows, it goes to seed, and then it's dead and it's gone. The next year you have to plant it again. So perennials and annuals are also something you want to pay attention to. So when we're talking about zones, we're usually talking about what is a perennial in this zone. So if you look, if you said, hey, a zone 4 plant, maybe an apricot tree is a zone 4 plant, well, then you can fool around a little bit. Maybe you wrap it in winter, or maybe you put lots of mulch on it, or maybe you're setting up your yard because you can, they call them microclimates. So say on the south side of a building, protected from our west wind, maybe you can kind of create a little pocket of zone 4. Okay, so lots of gardeners experiment with that. So when you're looking into zone 4 or zone 5 plants, it's not that they're impossible to grow here, it's just that they take a lot more work. So any zone 2, you probably won't see zone 0 plants ever, but you might see zone 2 or 3. And if you see hardy to zone 4 or 5, you know that they will take work. Okay? So yeah, microclimates can be created by the way you plant trees, the corner of your house. If you plant something on the south side, maybe you put landscape rocks there. Rocks hold heat more. So you can kind of do things as you progress in your gardening journey to kind of create microclimates. But if you're starting off kind of first, just figuring out and wanting to do it as simple and easy as possible, just go for zone 2 or zone 3 plants. So here, this map on the back, this gives you an idea of the zones. I'm sorry, it is chilly here, isn't it? I should have had you guys in the sunshine. Do we want to move into the sun? No? Okay. Okay. Okay, so plant hardiness zones, first thing anyone who's just coming to Edmonton to start to garden needs to know about. Now here's the second thing, frost-free days. And what governs the beginning and the end of the gardening season. So I know I had a Brazilian friend who was like, didn't know that you had to put seeds in the ground. Because in Brazil, things are just growing all the time. Here we have such a clear, as we know, it feels like 4 months of summer and 9 months of winter, right? So when we talk about frost-free days, frost, if you think of frost, it's like dew. The dew falls, but because the temperature goes to 0 or below, it freezes. So it freezes on the surface of the plants, the leaves, the stems, the fruit, like if it's tomatoes, it'll freeze on them and it'll damage the plants. So what gardeners are doing in the beginning of the season is, when's the last frost? When's the last frost? You need to know that the air will be warm enough for the plants to survive. You also need to know that the soil is warm enough. So as winter goes away, the air's warming up, the soil's warming up, and is it warm enough to put plants in? Well, we have some seeds can go in the ground early because they don't mind the cooler temperatures. But if you took, say, a plant, if I got this great I started a pumpkin I started hot peppers in my basement operation. I'm gonna take that hot pepper, I'm gonna throw it in the ground because I have a nice sunny day in April. Well, the dirt is still gonna be kind of cold, and you might get frost and your pepper will be toast. So all of that effort you put in, maybe January, February, March, starting it, is gonna be gone. So in Edmonton, the average day for the last frost of the year is between May 1st and May 10th. So that is when you're going to be aiming. If you put it in on May 1st, you can. Like for instance, seeds. A lot of seeds take 10 days to germinate anyway. So if you had your garden bed prepared, there are seeds you could put in the ground on May 1st. But if you've got bedding plants, you might not want to put them in until after May 10th, because that's the frost before the summer starts. How do you know the ground is warm enough? Actually, a lot of people are just looking at the temperature, but you can even dig your hands in and you can feel the dirt. Does it still feel chilly? Old farmers joke that if you put your bare bottom on the ground and it's warm, then you can plant. Don't do that. Or do it under cover of darkness. So yeah, so you want to make sure that you're not, especially if you're buying bedding plants, which we will talk about, you don't want to spend a ton of money, put them out, and then here comes the frost, and there you have to start all over again. Okay? So frost-free days, the first frost, so this is what we're kind of waiting for now, and I don't know if any of you heard on the radio on Thursday, there was a frost advisory. So if you look over to the bed right there, those are all tomatoes. So the farmers came, and those white sheets, they covered the tomatoes, because that's one thing you can do to protect your plants and your harvest from frost, is you throw a blanket. You'll see gardeners getting all their sheets and towels and putting them over to protect their plants for that first frost. So frost-free days, last frost, May 1st to 10th. First frost, September 11th to 20th. Frosts tend to come with the full moon. So if you're just looking at the calendar, so if we said first frost usually comes between September 11th to 20th, I didn't check, but if we checked and we saw there's a full moon on the 16th of September, there's more likely for a frost to happen at that time. Okay, questions? Okay, so I think that adds to an average of about 140 frost-free days per year. So what that's going to mean is when you're looking at plants, and we will pass some, how about we'll pass this box around, just grab a packet of seeds and look and see what it says for your number of frost-free days. Hello. Hi, how are you? Are you just coming to visit? Please go ahead, walk around. Sure, yeah, we're having a class about beginner gardening if you want, for sure. Yeah. So if you look at this seeds, these ones are kind of convenient. Look at this pepper. Right down here it says 70 to 90 days. So we know we have about 140 days to work with. So 70 to 90 days is going to be pretty safe, right? Corn will often tend to be longer. Corn will often tend to be around 110 days. So corn is often a little bit risky. Partly too because corn needs really high heat, and sometimes in Edmonton we don't get that high heat. So growing up, corn was always the thing. Are we going to get any corn or not? Other crops, you'll see, just see if either on the back or on the front, it mentions what how many days to harvest or days to maturity. That's going to help you know whether or not you can grow it. So for instance, tomatoes, I can't remember what they take, but say they take 180 days. Tomatoes are something you're going to want to start inside. If you plant tomatoes from seed, the frost, like once you can in May, they're not going to have enough time to develop the tomatoes before the frost comes around again. So tomatoes are something that you end up growing or starting inside, or buying bedding plants, which means someone else started them for you. Eggplants are the same, and also peppers are the same. Those are probably the 3 most common things that you would want to not start by seed. You would want to get the plant. Yes.
Okay, you answered what I wanted to ask. So I wanted to ask that, like, if you start them as plants indoor
Yeah.
and you transplant by the end of frost, is that still a good time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So let's say, and actually we have a calendar in here, and there's a few calendars online. The thing about online stuff is indoor stuff is going to be different, but when you're looking online, make sure it's pertinent to our climate, because a lot of times, even the books and stuff, you'll find, and it's gardening in other parts of Canada or in the US, and we really need to be using information that's relevant to Edmonton. One of the experts, of course, who was kind of known in Canada for a long time, I think he's a bit behind the scenes now, was Jim and Lois Holt. So if you saw a book by Lois Holt or Jim Holt, you know it's this climate. Another expert I'm going to mention him is, now I lost his last name, Rob Spruill. He's with Salisbury Greenhouses in Sherwood Park. So Rob Spruill, he grows here. So those are the ones who are going to be giving you information that fits with our climate. So average frost dates, May 1st to 10th, first frost 11th to 20th. What you'll hear a lot is people saying, oh, I never plant until the Victoria Day weekend, that 3rd weekend in May. So that you're always going to be safe if you plant after that May long weekend. But I mean, I guess we've rarely had frosts in June. We would have to go and look, but it's super, super rare. But also, sometimes people are just keener to get going soon. So you'll find more old school gardeners are saying wait till the May long weekend, and then younger, sort of more adventurous gardeners are putting stuff in a little bit earlier, especially in the city. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, one question. And so after frost, for example, here, maybe usually I remember like the late August.
Okay.
Yeah, we have the frost.
Yes.
And so, but after that, until maybe the October, suddenly the weather getting warm.
It can be warm.
So
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
period,
Yeah.
I was hoping to grow something. Is there anything like I can grow?
Well, if we were right now, say for instance on Thursday we had a frost advisory. How can we respond to that? We could come and pick all the tomatoes, and then they just ripen inside. It's not such a big deal. But actually, there is still this pocket of warm weather. So now, if I looked at the two-week forecast, I don't think frost is predicted for the next 2 weeks. So why not have the tomatoes ripen on the vine? They're much better. It's better than having them cluttering up my house. But what I would do then is I would, for that one night, come and cover the vegetables. And then if the morning leaves, then for the next 2 weeks, they're in the garden and they're growing. But to actually start something at this time, it's a little tricky, partly too because remember our light is waning. Our hours of daylight are already waning a lot. So you could, for instance, right now, could we go to the garden and plant some lettuce, which takes 24 days? Possibly. Lettuce can take a frost. So I could experiment with that. And what you'll find is the more sort of adventurous or innovative growers, and I don't mean that as it's just people who like trying things out, they might have cold frames, and I'll show you some cold frames when we tour the garden. It's basically like a mini greenhouse. So you would maybe get some old windows, or you can probably buy some. They might be expensive, or you could build one, and you would just have like a little box, and you would put it over the ground, and in the spring it means that ground heats up a lot faster, and I could put lettuce in there maybe in April. So you can use hoops, you can use cold frames, you can use different things to extend the season. But when we're just kind of outdoors and trying to do it the easy way and we're not that adventurous, then you would just be like, no, now the season is winding up. Even if we have warm in September, it's just a little too dicey, and the hours of daylight are waning, so what can I really grow in that time?
Sorry.
Yeah, go
Another
ahead.
question. I saw like a corn maze. They have this corn.
Yeah.
They grow very big. So
Yeah.
how can they grow like every year so
The
good?
corn that corn maze is not corn, it's field corn. So field corn would be corn that would either be chopped up for silage for animal feed, or in other parts of the world, like even in like northern US, they actually feed the corn to animals. Humans could eat it, but it's just not sweet corn. So in a corn maze, the species of, or the variety of corn that you see is probably not one that's available at your garden center. Yeah, yeah. What's that? Sorry? Of the, oh sure, yeah, dust, dirt, yes, perfect, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna skip the class for
Yeah,
today.
no problem, that's okay, it's
Oh,
great you
okay.
stayed, thank you for your help.
Okay,
Have
thank
you
you
harvested?
so much.
Okay, sure,
Bye-bye.
good. Okay, so when we think of frost too, as we're also imagining our yards and how we might set them up, frost works really, I think in my head, I think of it like water. So if you have a flood, water runs in certain ways. It goes to the lowest point, right? So frost, cold air also runs. So cold air is heavier than other temperatures of air, so it always sinks down. So where frost is more severe is in low spots.
So you want to plant.
You want to keep things, so if you had a low corner of your garden, you would either want to plant more cold season vegetables there, or maybe even just avoid it, or even lift it up if you want a landscape. So sometimes you'll hear on the radio, it'll say frost blah 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 in low-lying areas. So in a valley, I have a friend who farms southeast of Edmonton, and she talks about being in a frost hollow. I guess if you look at the topographical maps, her farm, everything farm kind of goes downwards, right? So she gets frost in ways that are much more intense than other places. Do you want a spot of sunlight? No, you're good? Oh, okay. Washroom is right there. There is no, I'm sorry, there's no hand sanitizer in there, but there's hand sanitizer right here. Yeah, you can go here. There's also one over in that corner, so whichever corner you want. And then we do have hand sanitizer here. I'm sorry, we can't keep hand sanitizer in the washer because it does get stolen. Okay, so frost makes sense? Okay. So when you're dealing with frost in the spring, what you're trying to do is not put your plants out too early. Some of your seeds you can put out, or if you do happen to put your plants out early and there's a frost warning, you would either bring them inside if they're in containers, or you would cover them. And that would help you get through a night or two. But again, it's a pain to have to do that for 2 weeks, right? So you just want to make sure that when you're putting your plants out, that you're past that kind of frost date. Okay, trying to think if there's anything I've missed. So what you would end up doing then is, if you wanted to get your garden in a bit earlier, is you're going to look at, well, what are the cool season crops? And those are crops that don't mind a bit of cool soil or cool weather. So the cooler season crops include cabbage, broccoli, onions, spinach, turnips, Brussels sprouts, kale, Swiss chard, rutabaga, leeks, parsnips, and horseradish. So if you were going to be a bit risky or wanting to get your garden in as early as you can, you would start with those either bedding plants or seeds. For instance, a lot of people plant peas in April because peas are a cold season crop. They don't need that soil to be really warm. I'm just going to grab my water bottle because I feel my
Just dry.
my voice going on and on and on. So there's warmer season crops. So those are ones you would, they're more tender. So you would wait a little bit for them. And those include tomatoes, eggplant, beans, squash, melons, corn, cucumber, basil. So if they even got a touch of frost, they're going to be damaged. Okay, other ones are tougher. So I'm not worried about getting my peas in on May 1st. I'm just waiting to the Victoria Day weekend, and then I'm planting everything. But if you wanted to, you know, be on top of it and get your early things in first, then here is a calendar that's from Tam Anderson at Prairie Gardens. She's just outside of the city, so she would be in what's considered zone 2. And so these dates are super conservative. If you follow these dates in the city, you will never go wrong. So but you could also adjust them a little bit. You could also go a bit earlier. So things that she is planting her vegetable garden the first weekend in May. Everything except pumpkins and cucumbers. So she's just putting it in despite the risk. Okay? And then she's usually seeding most things by May 15th. Okay? So here she gives you a good list of all of the things that you can plant and when. Snapdragons, lobelia, lettuce, cabbage, broccoli, and onions by May 10th. Okay, spinach, edible peas, and sweet peas can be sown directly into the ground, usually by April 20th. So she even goes super early with that. Okay, and then yeah, if you can get things into the ground that early, you can be picking peas, for instance, by July. Okay, so this is just an idea of what you can plant when. If you wanted to just be simple and clear, then plant after the May long weekend. But if you want to play around with it a bit, do the cool season crops maybe by May 1st, and then the warm season crops by May 15th. And then I also did include a link, you'll just have to Google it. It's to Rob Spruill's seeding calendar. He does his version of Tam's calendar, and that's under Salisbury Greenhouse. Also a great place for lots of gardening information. So, and then I think I've already read these to you. Here are the cool season crops, here are the warm season crops. And all that means is one can stand a little bit more cold in the spring and in the fall, and one needs a little bit more warmth in the spring and in the fall. Any questions?
I don't know if you've answered this, but what kind of plants are kale?
What kind of plant is kale? Cool season crop. It's in a family called the Brassica family. So kale, they're all cool season crops. Kale, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. They're actually genetically all the same plant. But in different parts of the world, they were bred, like here they were breeding them for the leaves, here they were breeding them for the flower, here they were breeding them for the bud. So they all developed into different plants, but genetically they're the same. So brassicas are cold season plants. They do well. Even Brussels sprouts, for instance, you want them to get a bit of frost because then they're sweeter. Yeah, and kale, you can harvest that kale practically till November. Like here, the gardeners have put that white sheet over top, but it's been covered with snow, and they lift up the white sheet, and underneath the kale is green, and they're harvesting it even into October and November. So kale is a really, the brassicas, if they weren't so tricky with the cabbage fly, I would tell people grow brassicas for sure. Except for kale, for beginner gardeners, I would say brassicas can be a little bit tricky because you're trying to deal with that white butterfly, which what happens is it lays eggs, the larvae hatch, and then eat the cabbage, eat the broccoli. So you always have to deal with worms and butterflies, but there are ways to get around that. Priscilla, you mentioned doing that. You're covering a thin sheet. One version is called remay, and then what you're doing, rain can get through, the sunshine can get through, but the butterflies can't get through.
So is it the same cover you use in winter?
You use in winter?
Yeah.
It could be. Yeah. I think because people talk about hoop houses, and they could be plastic, they could be light fabric. It just gives that little bit more protection.
Okay.
Yeah. So remay, though, when you use remay, you would want to make sure, like whenever you're covering something, like if something's going into a hoop house that's plastic, it's like a mini greenhouse, then it's not getting water. Whereas remay, that white fabric, you're putting it over your plants to protect them, but water can also go through.
I have a question, yeah. So how does cross pollination comes in now when the plants are covered? Yeah?
Right. How does it come in? I don't know that they need to be pollinated because you're not growing them for seed.
Okay.
Yeah. If you were growing broccoli for seed, you would need to wait for it to go to flower and then the bees would come. Bees actually love broccoli flowers. But because we're growing it for the vegetable, we're just going to harvest the vegetable and it doesn't matter. Like things that are fruits matter, right? Like apples or whatever, or tomatoes would need to be pollinated. If you covered tomatoes, you would need to go in with a paintbrush or something. But I can't think of a reason. There's no pest that you need to protect tomatoes from. But because with cabbage and broccoli and cauliflower, you're not wanting it to go to seed. You're eating it before it goes to seed. Pollination doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Quick question, please.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I might have to leave soon.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Thank you, by the way.
Sure,
There's
yeah.
been so much
Good.
to
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah.
But I'm just concerned. I didn't see anything about the kind of soil that
Oh, okay.
that you can grow with. I
just-
wonder because I
let's
think
talk about that right now.
I
You
made
have to
an
leave.
error
Okay.
planting with the soil in my yard.
Okay, you did make an error,
Yeah.
for sure. Okay, let's jump to soil because you say you do have to go.
Sorry.
We just touched on soil.
Okay.
We could have a whole class on soil.
Okay.
So if you are going to be growing in your yard and you want containers, you could go to Canadian Tire or go to Home Depot and you could buy bags of soil. And it'll say potting soil and just
Potting
take it.
Is
Like-
that is
But
sorry.
I might not take potting soil for my garden. Okay? So if you wanted to grow in your garden, so Alberta actually has a really rich soil. It's called black chernosium.
black?
Chernozem. I have to see Chernozemic. It has a funny name. So Alberta has a very, very rich soil. The problem is, as soon as you get into a city, it has been altered, right? Because of development, because of compaction, because there were streets here, there were houses there. All the soil on these whole two lots have been trucked in. Like there's probably been like, I don't know, 100, 200 truckloads of soil brought into these gardens. So if you are in your home and you want to go start a garden, you're actually going to have to get soil. Because what happens is when builders build houses is they take all the topsoil away and they bring very little of it back. They just want enough basically to grow grass. So when you're going to set out, say, to make a garden in your backyard, you can either, say someone had a garden there before and you just need to dig it up and maybe get rid of the weeds. You might want to amend the soil. So to make a soil richer, you might want to add manure, and you can get bags as well from a big box store. You might want to add manure. You might want to add compost. Some people add peat moss. That's more to lighten it up. Because what happens with soil is there's two things it has to do. Actually there's kind of three things. We have the mineral content, which plants need. We have the structure. So we need it actually to be a good structure that roots can go into. For instance, on a really dry year with the soil compacted, my mom's carrots were all like this big because they just couldn't get through the soil. So you want to make sure the structure of the soil is good. The ideal soil is what we call loam. Over here we have clay. Sorry, so there's one other thing with soil. It has to hold the roots and give like structure to the roots. It has to give nutrients to the plant. It also has to drain well. Like it has to hold water but not trap water. So if you have soil that has too much clay, it just like, imagine clay. We know we make pottery of it so we can carry water, right? So clay, if you have too much clay in your soil, the water goes and just sits there and basically your plants will drown, okay? If you have only sand, again, we know at the beach, did you ever like dig that hole and put water in and boom, it's gone, right? Like sand doesn't hold water. So you want something in the middle. It's called loam. It holds enough moisture, but it doesn't trap it. So when you're trying to build up your garden and your soil, you would want to, if you have a garden bed, so you've already dug it up, you've already done something, what you're going to want to do is amend it, which means add some of these things to it. Peat moss will usually be added to create a nice structure that drains well. Compost will usually be added for the organic material, and manure as well. So you're going to add things to the soil to make it better and stir it in. You don't want all manure and you don't want all compost. They're too rich. One thing that happens when your soil is too rich, things grow, but the vegetables don't grow. So vegetable production is often, like say tomatoes, the goal of the plant for growing a tomato is to get its seed out into the world. So they need to feel often a little bit of stress to do that. Life is ending, I need to get my seed out there. Whereas if life is so good, they just grow and grow and grow and they never make the fruit. So you don't want your soil to be too rich. So if you are in a backyard, you could either dig out your sod and peel it away, or you can build up on top of your sod. And you could do that with a raised bed like these, creating a box, and you might put down cardboard. You could put down, you would need to probably, you could do something called lasagna gardening, where people put layers, a layer of wood shavings, a layer of peat moss, a layer of all of those things, and then you would put bedding plants into it. You wouldn't put seeds into it, because seeds do need the soil. So, but over a year or two, that would become soil. Yeah, Priscilla.
So you said to put cardboard. Won't that prevent the roots from going down?
Well, if it's a raised bed, this will be enough. But also, when you do, if you do cardboard mulching, you're wetting as you go. You put cardboard, you wet it. You put straw, then you wet it. You put dirt, then you wet it. So it eventually disappears. But you wouldn't, if it was this, then you're in trouble. But if you have a raised bed that say that's this deep, you'll be okay.
So what of the sod beneath it?
The sod beneath is just going to die.
Okay.
You're kind of choking it off.
Okay.
Yeah.
So everything eventually becomes like rich?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And you'll find out that every year you just have to probably add a little bit more or stir in a little bit, because of course plants are taking out the nutrients. Ronke, very nice to meet you. I'm glad you could be here. My number's on there, so call me if you have other questions.
I will.
And I think I'll just be in touch with Priscilla about additional classes. Maybe we do a whole one on soil, a whole one on composting. Okay.
But
Good.
thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Yeah.
You're very welcome. So soil, you can make decisions about how you want to do it. If you dig down, that's great. It could take work digging out the sod. Usually that's what you're dealing with. But having a bed in the soil, what are the advantages? It usually maintains moisture better. Raised beds have to be watered more. There's advantages to raised beds. One is they warm up faster. So if you are a person who wants to get your garden in as soon as possible, if you have a raised bed, it's going to heat up faster in the spring. At the same time, because it also is going to let moisture go away sooner. You can mitigate that by putting mulch. Whenever you put down mulch, like wood chips or even chopped up weeds, you're going to be, one, it'll gradually break down and enrich the soil, but two, it will also repress the weeds and maintain the moisture. So mulching is a really good thing, and you'll really want to do it especially if you have raised beds. Being in containers. Containers are super convenient. Maybe they're all you can take on. Maybe you want to just dip your toe into gardening really slowly. A container, you can grow tomato plants in containers, you can grow corn in containers, you can grow kale in containers. It's very convenient. If you have containers, you can bring them in if there's going to be a frost, take them out. The thing about containers also is they do not maintain, they need to be watered a lot. Because it's just a small amount of soil, you have to water much more than you would if they were just in the ground. So you might dig into the ground to make your garden bed, you might build up to make your garden bed, or you might just stick to containers. So if you need a lot of soil, that's where you would call a landscaping company and get them to deliver it. And I think a garden bed, you would be talking about 1 or 2 square yards of soil. So what's going to happen is the delivery will cost you more than the soil itself. But it might be easier than, you know, putting 10 huge bags of soil into your car and driving home with it. So soil is tricky, but one of the things that I think happens once you start gardening is you become more interested, or you have to deal with leftovers more. You have to deal with weeds. You have to deal with stray lettuce leaves or whatever. So you do actually end up thinking more about compost. And once you start thinking about compost, you're also thinking about the soil. So it kind of, I find it goes.
Yeah, I have a question. I see them harvesting the green tomatoes. Can you harvest that?
Say that again.
I feel like they are harvesting the green tomatoes.
They have been harvesting green tomatoes. Yeah. I think I would wait till they're a bit redder, but they do ripen off the vine. So you would just put them. Some people eat green tomatoes, like say in Mexico, it's very common to eat green tomatoes. But you can also, you just put them in a box or a bowl, and you have them in your kitchen, and you just see them go red. And as they go red, you just eat them.
Okay.
So all those green tomatoes will go red, even though they're picked.
Oh, so do you have to cover the bowl? Or?
No, nothing. Okay. You'll get lots and lots of advice. Wrap each one in newspaper. Put them in the dark. Here's, again, simple. If I put all my tomatoes wrapped in newspaper in a box in the basement, I'll forget about them. In 2 weeks, I'll come and I'll have all rotten tomatoes. So for me, I get like, you know, a flat, like from the store, like of Coke cans or whatever. Get a few flats, put your tomatoes in, lay them out so you can see them all, and put them in a place where you can watch them on your counter or even in the living room, so you see them ripen and you just take them as they get ripe.
Okay.
Because I just find as soon as things are out of sight, then I forget about it, right? So, or even if you remember in a couple days, that red one maybe's already gone moldy and now the other ones around it are going moldy. So, doesn't matter if it's in the sunshine, doesn't matter, just put them on your counter, and super simple. But if you Googled how to ripen tomatoes in the house, you will get a million answers, and most of them are quite complicated, but yeah.
Okay.
So I feel like you probably had to listen to my voice enough by now. There's a lot of things to think about, but also I love it when people go for it, right? Like, there's nothing like just learning as you go. I recommend keeping a diary, because then you can remember what you did last year and how it worked or didn't work. And then as you go, you just refine. Also, you see, oh, I planted the tomatoes there this year and they didn't do so well, but I tried them here this year and they did better. Is it that maybe it's because it's a shadier spot, or maybe because it's a sunnier spot? Like, all of those things, you'll start to get to know the parts of your garden and how things grow in each different part. Yeah. You had a nice visit?
Oh yeah,
Good.
Thank you so much.
You're
It's
so
a really
welcome.
nice place.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you came.
Yeah, thank you. And one question.
Yeah.
I grow the I plant the